We're back with an all-new Rick and Morty episode from Season 7, and I'm going to keep things short and sweet this week, because what was that?
Who the heck are you? What are you talking about?
Honestly, I was almost tempted to skip this week. I mean, Rick did after all, but in all seriousness, I've got another video in the works that's much more deserving of my time, so there it is. But enough chit-chat, let's dive on in. So something I forgot to mention last week about this certain homogeneity to Season 7 is how canonical it is, not just as a season itself, but in relation to previous seasons of the show, especially the earlier ones like Season 2. It's sort of like how some current Pokemon games have gone ahead and given evolutions to overlooked Pokemon from previous generations. Season 7 is basically the equivalent to Generation 4 of Pokemon. So far, we've had episodes dedicated to Unity and Mr. Poopy Butthole, who were both introduced in Season 2. Last week's episode was a spoof on Total Recall, which was also spoofed back in Season 2 with Total Recall. And now this week has dedicated an entire episode off a gag in Get Schwifty's tag, which was repurposed for the cold open of this episode.
Water Tea! Where are you going? There's too many of them!
Then I better crunch the numbers.
Up to this point, basically every episode, save for maybe That's Amorte, has either built off of or highly referenced an episode from a previous season, but Season 2 is the clear frontrunner. And on one hand, it's a smart move, seeing as Season 2 is currently deemed the best, or at least the fan favorite, but if they're not careful, they can start to sully the good name of that season.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Now, I'm seeing the fanbase being very divided on Rise of the Numbericons, but let's be honest, the fanbase being divided on an episode is nothing new. This fanbase has always been very reactionary, very vocal, and sometimes very toxic, and so one must read between the lines to safely draw conclusions on the actual consensus. So far, it seems like some found this episode very funny and enjoyed the insanely silly story for what it is. An experimental, filler episode riddled with corny but somewhat creative puns. And others are asking where the heck is Rick and why did we just dedicate 22 plus minutes to a stupid gag all the way back from Get Schwifty? And while normally I'm much more in the middle on topics like this, I have to agree with the latter this time around. I personally can appreciate the novelty and ambition behind this episode, but let's be real, this one just wasn't special enough to warrant the runtime dedicated to it. It is not going to be a memorable episode or a highly discussed one way down the line. The way I see it, this was our mandatory Star Wars episode for the season, and a weird one at that, seeing as it's kind of a Morty episode, but at the same time, not at all. It feels like this should definitely have been episode 6 or 7, that is if we absolutely had to have it, before Rick starts to get his groove back.
You heard him, boys? Kill him before he gets his groove!
Which would also allow for his absence in this episode to make much more logical sense. Honestly guys, I just wish I could be a fly on the wall in the writer's room to see what made them think that this was such a deserving episode. I mean, they legitimately thought that this particular storyline should make up 10% of Season 7's overall runtime. Like, to me, that's absolute madness. This should have been a B plot at most, probably just a C plot, or maybe even just another tag at the end of the episode.
Yo, Chuck, it's Marvin! Your cousin, Marvin D? Hey, you know that new sound you looking for? Well, listen to this!
And another trend that continues with Rise of the Numbericons, the movie, is the lack of B-plots, which makes it frighteningly obvious at this point that they are freaking going for it this season. An entire 10-episode season without a single B-plot. Whoa. Again, part of me revels in the ambition and novelty of that idea. I do like a lot of what they're doing with this season, but this episode screws up the season's overall consistency for me, so I'm definitely feeling a little bit bitter. And watch it all be entirely just to set up a stupid joke in the Season 8 premiere. I could totally see them doing something like that with Rick making some meta joke like, "We're back and so are the B-plots." I don't know. Overall, Rise of the Numbericons, the movie, just didn't scratch that itch for me, being an odd mishmash of Star Wars and Transformers, but also an entire episode dedicated to paying off a silly tag from Season 2's Get Schwifty. It feels like the writers lost themselves in the novelty that this episode relies upon. It certainly continues the Season 7 trends we talked about last week, more pop culture references than usual, a lack of B-plots, and extended gags in the style of Family Guy. I mean, this entire episode felt like one long gag given its origins and the lack of B-plots. But this one felt like a huge misstep, desperately depending on the nostalgia from Rick and Morty's most popular season.
Hey, Ice-T, it's me, Morty. Remember me? Get Swifty?
No.
It tries to be funny with its puns, but I personally found the humor to be very situational and made for specific tastes. Although that said, I do appreciate their continued use of comedy's rule of 3.
Sorry I'm late. I had to go pee. Sorry I'm late. I had to go pee.
I know.
Well, there's new people. I thought they'd like to hear about it.
Yeah, just start the shits.
Wait, let me go pee first. That way when we get there, I'll get to say, well, I'm not gonna spoil it.
Comedy comes in threes.
And lastly, while I'm sure there's something deeper to take away from this episode, I'm honestly at a loss for what that could be, same as how I was with episode 3, Air Force Wong. Is the episode trying to take a dig at interracial couples, or at star-crossed lovers, or is it all just one long promotion for math? Your guess is as good as mine.
I thought you said he'd thank math.
There must be some mistake. Try a different channel.
The mistake was believing you even knew Ice-T and could get me that math-loving youth vote. Now get out of here.
Either way, I think this was Season 7's weakest episode so far. Removing Rick entirely was a bold and risky experiment, and while I applaud them for taking that leap of faith, I don't think it paid off in the end. But I want to hear your thoughts on this episode, so don't be shy, let us all know how you really feel down in the comments below. Do you agree with my take? Was I too hard on this one? Or would you rather not talk about it? I get it, math is scary sometimes. If you enjoyed the review, let me know by hitting that like button, and if you want to hear more of my thoughts on Season 7 thus far, you can check out my previous episode reviews using the links in the description below. I also have a bunch of Rick and Morty rankings, which you can check out using the playlist in the outro, and if those excite you, consider subscribing so that you don't miss my ranking on Season 7. But as for now, that's it for me. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I will see you all next time.
Sorry, Mr. Goldenfold.
Detention! Class dismissed early so Morty can have instant detention.
No, I want to learn.